The house was alive with sound, music playing softly in the background, a faint hum of Emma's favorite perfume lingering in the air. But for me, none of it brought comfort. I paced the living room, struggling to calm the storm inside my head. Emma, meanwhile, was in front of the mirror, spinning slightly as she adjusted her dress for what must have been the 100th time. She radiated excitement, oblivious to the tension brewing just a room away. "Mark, can you help me with this necklace?" she called, her tone clipped with impatience. I walked over, pretending to focus on the clasp while forcing down the words fighting to come out. But I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Emma," I started, my voice tight, "we need to talk." Her eyes met mine through the mirror, full of impatience. "Can it wait? I'm already late." "No, it can't," I said, my voice steady but firm. "This has been on my mind for too long." She sighed, her irritation evident. "Mark, I told you, it's just a night out with the girls. Nothing to worry about." "That's what you always say," I replied, working to keep my frustration in check. "But it's every weekend now. I'm sitting here alone while you're out, and it feels like this isn't a marriage anymore." Emma spun around to face me, her arms crossed. "This is ridiculous. I need time with my friends, just like everyone else. Some people have hobbies, I have my girls. I'm just trying to have a little fun." "Fun," I repeated, the word sour in my mouth. "Or is it something more?" Her cheeks flushed, a mix of anger and disbelief flashing across her face. "Are you accusing me of cheating?" "No," I said quickly, though the doubts had been eating away at me for weeks. "But you're shutting me out. You go out, and you come back hours later like none of it matters. I don't even know what part of your life I belong to anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm not a child, Mark. I don't need to explain myself every time I go out. I have fun, I come home, end of story." I took a deep breath, trying to steady the emotion creeping into my voice. "It's not about explanations, it's about us. I feel like I'm not even a part of your world anymore. Do you even care how this makes me feel?" Her expression softened for a moment, but the frustration didn't fade. "Mark, this isn't about you. I'm not going to stop seeing my friends just because you're feeling insecure." "Insecure?" Her words hit like a slap, but I stood my ground. "Maybe I am. But if we're not even talking about this, how are we supposed to fix it?" Emma shook her head, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. "I'm already late. We'll talk about this later, if you're still upset." The door clicked shut, and I was left in the silence, surrounded by the echo of everything unsaid. The house felt colder, the faint beat of music from her night out seeming to mock the emptiness around me. That night, sleep didn't come easily. As I stared at the ceiling, the distance between us felt wider than ever. Something had to change, but I wasn't sure if it already was too late. The next morning was painfully quiet. The air between us was thick with unspoken tension, and every sound seemed to echo in the silence of the house. Emma sat at the table with her coffee, scrolling on her phone like everything was fine. I'd spent the night tossing and turning, rehearsing what I needed to say. Now it was time to confront it head-on. "Emma," I began, my voice calm but firm. "We need to talk. And this time, we're not brushing it aside." She looked up, her brow furrowed as she set down her mug. "What is it now, Mark?" I sat across from her, the weight of the conversation pressing heavily on my chest. "I can't keep doing this. Every weekend you're out, and I'm left here wondering where we stand. I've tried to brush it off, but it's eating away at me." Emma sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Mark, we've been over this. I go out, I have fun, and I come home. It's not like I'm doing anything wrong." "It's not just about what you're doing," I replied, my tone soft but resolute. "It's how it makes me feel, like I'm not a priority anymore. Like I'm being left behind." Her face hardened, her arms crossing defensively. "So what are you saying? That I should just stop seeing my friends?" "No," I said, holding her gaze. "I'm saying we need balance. I've been patient, but I'm starting to feel like I don't even matter in your life anymore. I need to know where you stand, Emma, whether you're still committed to this relationship." Emma's eyes narrowed, her voice rising with frustration. "Are you seriously giving me an ultimatum right now?" I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. "Yes," I said finally. "I am. Either you make time for this marriage, make time for us, or we need to rethink where we're headed. I can't keep living like this, Emma. I deserve more." She shot up from her seat, her cheeks flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous, Mark. You're being controlling and unreasonable. I'm not going to stop living my life just because you're insecure." "It's not about control," I said, my voice strained with emotion. "It's about respect. About us. I'm trying to save something here, and all you're doing is pushing me further away." She shook her head, grabbing her purse from the counter. "I need space, Mark. If you can't handle that, maybe you should take a look at your own issues. I'm going out, we'll talk about this later." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the echoes of her words. I sat back down, my head in my hands, feeling a mix of despair and determination. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a crossroads. As the hours dragged on, the emptiness of the house seemed to close in around me. Her laughter from another night out drifted faintly through the walls, a haunting reminder of how far apart we'd grown. By the time she returned, the faint sound of her key turning in the lock, I had already made up my mind. I couldn't keep doing this, not like this. The house was silent when Emma came home, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She froze the moment she noticed a stack of boxes by the front door. Her carefree expression fell away, replaced by confusion and then concern. "Mark," she called out, her voice uncertain. "What's going on?" I stepped out from the bedroom, doing my best to maintain composure. The turmoil inside me was raging, but I'd made my decision. "I'm here," I said quietly, gesturing toward the note I'd left on the coffee table. "Read it." Her hands trembled as she picked it up, her eyes scanning the words aloud. "Emma, I can't continue like this. I hope you find what you're looking for. I need to move on. Mark." She turned to me, her face pale, her voice breaking. "You're leaving? Just like that?" "It didn't have to come to this," I said, trying to keep the sadness out of my voice. "But I can't keep living like this, feeling like I'm an afterthought in my own marriage. I've tried to talk to you, Emma, but nothing ever changes. I can't keep waiting." Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a hesitant step toward me. "Mark, please. Let's talk about this. Don't do this now, we can figure something out." I shook my head, guilt twisting inside me at the sight of her distress. "Emma, I've been trying to talk for weeks. Every time, it feels like we're just going in circles. I need to step back and figure out where I stand, where we stand." She wiped at her tears, her gaze darting to the boxes and back to me. Her voice trembled. "So this is it? You're just leaving? You're not even giving us a chance to work things out?" "It's not that simple," I said, struggling to control the emotions swirling in my chest. "I need to make a choice for myself, Emma. If you need time to reflect on your priorities, then I need time to do the same." Her expression shifted, anger flashing in her eyes. "So you're giving up? Just like that? Is this really the end?" "I don't want it to be," I admitted, my throat tight. "But I can't keep living like this, hoping, waiting, and feeling like nothing I say matters. I need to move forward. For my own sake." She stood there, silent and defeated, her shoulders slumped. The weight of everything unsaid hung heavily in the room. After what felt like an eternity, she took a deep breath and spoke softly. "If that's what you really want, then go." I swallowed hard, picking up the last of my bags. I paused for a moment, looking at her one final time. "I'm sorry, Emma. I hope you find what you're looking for." The door closed softly behind me as I stepped out into the cool night air. The home we'd built together, filled with years of memories, now felt like a distant chapter in someone else's story. As I walked away, the faint sound of her muffled sobs lingered in my ears, a reminder of what had been lost. For the first time, the separation wasn't just an idea, it was real. The days after I left were a blur of mixed emotions, freedom, sadness, and a lingering sense of failure. I threw myself into my routine, hoping the grind of work would distract me from the emptiness that came with walking away from a life I'd spent years building. Emma, I'd later learn, was left to face the stark reality of my absence. The house that had once been filled with shared laughter and quiet companionship now felt unbearably quiet. Every corner echoed with the weight of what had been lost, and every mundane task was a reminder of how much had changed. She tried to fill the void with her usual activities, going out with her friends and pretending nothing had shifted. But the facade didn't hold for long. It wasn't just about my absence, it was about the emptiness that had crept into her life, no matter how much she tried to ignore it. One afternoon, Emma found herself at her sister Anna's house. Anna had always been the one she turned to when things got tough, and now, Emma was desperate for someone to make sense of the mess she'd found herself in. Anna greeted her at the door with a warm hug. "You look like you need a good cup of tea and a long talk," she said with a sympathetic smile. Emma managed a faint laugh as she settled onto the couch. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice shaky. Anna handed her a steaming mug and sat beside her. "Why don't you just talk? Start wherever you want." Emma stared down at the cup in her hands, the warmth doing little to ease the cold knot in her stomach. "Mark left," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "He packed his things and walked out. I didn't think he'd actually go through with it." Anna's brow furrowed with concern. "How are you holding up?" Emma shook her head, her voice cracking. "Not well. I thought he was being unreasonable, always complaining about me going out. But now, I don't know. Maybe he was right. I didn't see how much this was hurting him. I just kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal." Anna reached out and took her hand. "Sometimes it's hard to see what's important until it's too late. But it sounds like you're starting to realize what really matters." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she nodded. "I was so defensive. I thought it would all work itself out. But now it feels like I've lost everything." Before Anna could respond, the doorbell rang. She excused herself to answer it, returning moments later with an envelope in her hand. "This just came for you," she said, her voice gentle. Emma's hands trembled as she opened it, scanning the formal letter inside. Her breath hitched, her face going pale. "He filed for divorce," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "I didn't think he'd actually do it." Anna's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I can't imagine how hard this must be." Emma sank back into the couch, overwhelmed by the weight of the letter in her hands. "I kept thinking we'd have more time, that I could fix it. I didn't realize how serious he was until now." Anna placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes, it takes something drastic to show us what we've been taking for granted. But that doesn't mean it's too late for you to grow, Emma. This might be the wake-up call you needed." Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I see it now. I took him for granted. I thought I could have it all, my freedom, my nights out, and still keep him. But I was wrong." Anna squeezed her hand. "Recognizing it is a step forward, even if it hurts. You can't change the past, but you can learn from it." Emma wiped her tears, her expression shifting to something closer to determination. "I need to face this head-on. I need to understand my mistakes and make sure I never repeat them." The weight of her choices hung heavy, but for the first time, Emma began to see the road ahead, not as a path to fix what was broken, but to figure out who she truly was. For Emma, the reality of the divorce hit harder with each passing day. The house that had once been a symbol of their shared life now felt like an empty shell, echoing with memories of laughter and warmth that seemed impossibly far away. She tried to distract herself, long walks, binge-watching TV shows, anything to drown out the silence. But the letter from Mark's lawyer sat on the counter like an anchor, tethering her to the choices that had led her here. One evening, as she flipped through old photo albums, she felt the sharp sting of regret. Pictures of Mark smiling beside her at birthdays, holidays, and family trips now seemed like glimpses of a life she'd thrown away. How did it come to this? She thought, clutching the album tightly. I thought I was just having fun, but I was pushing him away the whole time. A few days later, she reached out to Mark, not to beg for reconciliation, but to try and understand where they stood. When he answered, his voice was calm but distant, as if he had already moved on in his mind. I didn't call to fight, Emma started, her voice hesitant. I wanted to hear how you're doing. Mark paused, the silence on the line heavy. I'm doing okay, he said finally. It hasn't been easy, but I'm figuring it out. She swallowed hard, her hands shaking. I know I hurt you, Mark. I see that now. And I'm sorry for everything. I appreciate that, he replied, his tone softening slightly. But Emma, this isn't something I can just forget. I gave you everything I had, and it felt like it was never enough for you. Tears welled in her eyes as she listened to his words, each one like a dagger. I didn't mean to push you away, she whispered. I thought I could keep everything separate, my social life, our marriage, but I see now how wrong I was. I don't doubt that you're sorry, Mark said, his voice steady. But it doesn't change what's happened. I've made my decision, Emma. I need to move on, for my own sake. His words left her breathless, the finality of them sinking deep into her chest. She knew there was no changing his mind. That night, Emma sat alone, staring at the divorce papers. For years, she had taken Mark's loyalty and patience for granted, assuming he would always be there no matter what. Now, she was left to face the consequences of her actions and the reality of what she had lost. Her weekends of freedom, once filled with laughter and friends, now felt like a hollow memory. The cost of her choices was clear, and for the first time, she truly understood the weight of what Mark had endured. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew one thing for certain, she couldn't go back. All she could do now was pick up the pieces and try to find a way forward. The days turned into weeks, and Emma slowly began to confront the full weight of her new reality. The once bustling home she shared with Mark now felt like a museum of memories, a place filled with echoes of what used to be. Every photo, every piece of furniture seemed to remind her of the life she had dismantled. Her friends, who had once been her escape, now felt like strangers. The nights out, the laughter, the fleeting excitement, it all seemed meaningless in the cold light of her loneliness. She stopped attending their gatherings, retreating into the quiet spaces of her mind to reflect on the choices that had led her here. One evening, as she sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea, her sister Anna called. "How are you holding up?" Anna asked gently. Emma sighed, her voice heavy. "I don't know. I feel like everything's slipped through my fingers. I thought I was balancing it all, having fun, being independent, but I was just selfish. I didn't realize how much I was hurting Mark until it was too late." Anna paused, choosing her words carefully. "It sounds like you're starting to understand, Emma. But beating yourself up won't change the past. What matters now is what you do with what you've learned." Emma nodded, though Anna couldn't see her. "I know. I just wish I could undo it, make him see that I get it now." "Maybe it's not about undoing," Anna replied. "Maybe it's about figuring out who you are now, without him. It's going to hurt, but sometimes the hardest lessons are the most important ones." Emma took her sister's advice to heart. Over the following weeks, she started to piece together a new routine. She volunteered at a local shelter, filling her days with purpose. She attended therapy, digging into the reasons she had felt the need to escape her marriage in the first place. Bit by bit, she began to rebuild, not the life she had with Mark, but something entirely new. Months later, Emma sat in the same living room where she and Mark had once shared so many arguments, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. She had written a letter to Mark, not to beg for forgiveness or rekindle their relationship, but to thank him. "Mark, The letter began, "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on everything, on us, on what I did, and on what I lost. I won't ask for anything from you, but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. Your love and patience deserved more than what I gave. Thank you for everything you gave me, and for teaching me what really matters. I hope you find happiness, you deserve it." As she sealed the envelope, she felt a sense of peace. Her journey wasn't over, but she was learning to live with her mistakes and grow from them. Mark, for his part, had moved on. He poured himself into his work and found joy in the little things, quiet mornings with coffee, catching up with old friends, and rediscovering the parts of himself he had once set aside for the sake of his marriage. He never responded to Emma's letter, though he read it carefully. He wished her well in his heart, but he had no intention of revisiting the past. The road ahead was his to walk alone, or maybe, someday, with someone new. For both Emma and Mark, the pain of their separation became a turning point rather than an end. Though their paths no longer intertwined, each found new strength and clarity in the spaces they had once filled with resentment and regret. Emma sold the house they had shared, choosing to downsize and start fresh. She focused on rebuilding herself, finding new friendships and learning how to appreciate the quiet moments she had once avoided. Volunteering became her way of giving back, a small step toward making amends for the selfishness that had cost her so much. She still thought about Mark often, about the nights they'd spent laughing on the couch, about the mornings he'd bring her coffee without a word. Those memories were bittersweet, but she held on to them as a reminder of what love could be when it was nurtured instead of taken for granted. Mark, meanwhile, found himself thriving in unexpected ways. For the first time in years, he felt free to focus on himself, free from the weight of a relationship that had grown one-sided. His friends rallied around him, offering support, encouragement, and the occasional beer-fueled pep talk about getting back out there. One sunny afternoon, Mark decided to take a day off from work, a rarity for him, and drove to a nearby park. As he sat on a bench, watching the world go by, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. He didn't need to rush into anything new or prove anything to anyone. He was content, and that was enough. Years later, their lives had completely diverged. Emma heard through mutual friends that Mark had started seeing someone, a kind, down-to-earth woman who shared his love for quiet mornings and hard work. The news stung at first, but she found herself smiling through the ache. He deserves it, she thought. He deserves someone who sees him for who he is and values every part of him. As for Emma, she continued her journey of self-discovery. She didn't rush into another relationship, knowing she had more growing to do before she could truly give her heart to someone again. The story of Mark and Emma wasn't one of reconciliation, but one of growth, of two people learning from their mistakes and finding their way forward. Their love had been real, even if it hadn't lasted, and the lessons they carried from it shaped the people they became. In the end, it wasn't about getting back what was lost, but about creating something new from the pieces that remained.